Right now, scattered across American backyards, there are fruit trees and berry bushes that could get a visit from a state agriculture inspector. Not because anyone's committing a crime in the usual sense, but because some of these plants are genuinely toxic, genuinely destructive, or flat-out banned from sale in dozens of states. One fruit is dangerous enough that eating it before it's ready can cause seizures and death within hours. Another triggered one of the largest plant eradication campaigns in U.S. history, with federal agents tearing out hundreds of millions of bushes by hand. A third was sold by nurseries by the millions before becoming public enemy number one for forests across the South. We went through FDA import alerts, USDA archives, and state noxious weed lists so you don't have to. Here are 15 fruits that are restricted, regulated, or genuinely illegal to grow or sell somewhere in America. 1. Ackee. Bright red pods that split open to reveal glossy black seeds sitting on soft yellow flesh. Ackee is Jamaica's national fruit and the backbone of ackee and saltfish. It isn't even native to the Caribbean. The tree originated in West Africa and was carried to Jamaica in the 1700s, later named Blighia sapida after Captain William Bligh, who helped introduce it to European botanists. The danger is entirely about timing. Unripe ackee contains a toxin called hypoglycin A, at concentrations roughly 10 times higher than what's considered safe. Hypoglycin A blocks your body's ability to produce new glucose, so blood sugar crashes hard, and cooking does nothing to neutralize it. Eaten too early, it triggers what doctors call Jamaican vomiting sickness, violent vomiting, seizures, coma, and in serious cases, death. The only safe window is after the fruit has split open naturally on the tree. Because of this, the FDA maintains a standing import alert, number 2111, that automatically detains all fresh ackee shipments at U.S. ports unless they come from one of a small list of green list processors that have proven their fruit is properly ripened and tested below 100 parts per million of hypoglycin A canned and frozen ackee from those approved sources is completely legal and widely sold in the U.S., especially in Caribbean grocery stores. What's effectively banned is the fresh, untested fruit crossing the border, which is why almost no American has ever eaten it straight off the tree. Bringing in a prohibited shipment, even a small personal quantity, can mean seizure at customs and civil penalties of up to $1,000 for a first offense. 2. Black currant. For most of the 20th century, planting a black currant bush across huge swaths of the U.S. was a federal crime, and the reason had almost nothing to do with the berry itself. Black currants and their relatives in the genus ribs, including gooseberries, are the essential alternate host for a fungus called Crenardium ribicola, or white pine blister rust. The fungus needs both a 5-needle white pine and a ribs plant to complete its life cycle, jumping back and forth between the two. When blister rust arrived from Europe in the early 1900s, it threatened to collapse the white pine timber industry across New England, the Great Lakes, and the Pacific Northwest. In 1911, the federal government banned the import, planting, and transport of all rib species nationwide, and crews spent decades manually digging up and destroying bushes, sometimes whole farms at a time, near pine stands. By the 1960s, breeders had developed rust-resistant currant varieties and resistant pine strains, and the federal government lifted its ban in 1966, handing regulatory control to individual states. Progress after that was slow and uneven. New York didn't lift its own ban until 2003. New Hampshire actually reissued a moratorium on black currant cultivation after new disease research raised fresh concerns. And in Massachusetts, 144 of the state's 351 cities and towns still prohibit planting rib species entirely, with no permit available for true black currant. California, by contrast, has no restriction at all, which is part of why black currant farming is making a slow comeback in pockets of the Northeast. 3. Miracle fruit. This small red West African berry has an almost science fiction power. Bite into one, then eat a raw lemon, and the lemon tastes like lemonade with no sugar involved. The effect comes from a glycoprotein called miraculin, which binds to your tongue's sweet receptors and stays inactive at the mouth's normal pH. The moment something acidic hits your tongue, that bound miraculin flips on the sweet receptors, and your brain reads sour as sweet for up to an hour. There's a persistent myth that miracle fruit itself is illegal in the United States, and it's mostly false. What actually happened is narrower and stranger. In 1974, a company tried to commercialize tablets of extracted miraculin as a calorie-free sugar substitute. After initially favorable conversations, the FDA abruptly classified miraculin as an unapproved food additive, since it had never gone through the formal safety testing required for generally recognized as safe, or GRAS, status. That decision effectively killed large-scale commercialization at the time, and persistent rumors, never proven, claim the sugar industry lobbied against it behind the scenes. That 1974 ruling only ever applied to extracted, isolated miraculin marketed as a sweetener. The whole fresh berry, the seeds, and the living plant have remained legal to grow, sell as produce, and eat in the U.S. the entire time. Florida growers sell fresh miracle fruit and freeze-dried tablets today, often at novelty, flavor-tripping parties. A modern company even filed a new GRAS notice with the FDA in recent years to formally clear miracle fruit powder for food use, decades after the original controversy. 4-calorie pear, Bradford pear. For decades, the USDA actively promoted this tree. Developed at a federal plant research station in Glendale, Maryland, in the 1950s, as a fire blight-resistant, fast-growing ornamental, the Bradford pear cultivar was planted along American streets, schoolyards, and suburban driveways by the millions, prized for its uniform shape and explosion of white spring blossoms. It was bred to be sterile, but that didn't last. As more calorie pear cultivars were planted near each other, cross-pollination between different varieties produced fertile seeds, something nobody anticipated at scale. Birds ate the small fruits and spread seeds for miles, and the trees escaped into roadsides, pastures, and forest edges across the Midwest and South, forming dense thickets armed with thorns sturdy enough to puncture tractor tires. The flowers, meanwhile, are notorious for smelling like rotting fish. Ohio became the first state to act, banning the sale and planting of every calorie pear variety starting January 1, 2023, after passing the law back in 2018 with a 5-year phase-out. Pennsylvania's ban took effect in February 2024, and South Carolina's followed that October. In all 3 states, existing trees on private property are grandfathered in and don't have to be removed, but nurseries can no longer legally sell or plant new ones. Several states, including Virginia and parts of the Midwest, now run Bradford Pear Bounty programs, offering homeowners a free native tree in exchange for cutting one down. 5. The date. This is the most obscure entry on the list, but it's entirely real. In the early 20th century, the USDA was working to establish a commercial date industry in California's Coachella Valley and parts of Arizona, importing offshoots of prized date palm varieties from the Middle East and North Africa. Along with those imports came an unwanted hitchhiker, the Parlotoria date scale, a tiny insect capable of devastating date palm groves. To stop the pest before it could wipe out the fledgling industry, federal officials issued a national date palm quarantine in 1929, restricting the movement and import of date palm material across the country. The quarantine remained in force for years, with regulators tracking and treating infested groves, before officials finally lifted it in 1936, once the scale insect was brought under control. It's a small, half-forgotten chapter of agricultural history, but it helped protect what eventually grew into a genuine American date industry, and date palm material is still tightly regulated today because of newer threats like the red palm weevil. 6. Autumn olive. Autumn olive berries taste a bit like tart cranberries crossed with pomegranate, and they're loaded with lycopene and antioxidants. The shrub behind them, however, is one of the more aggressive invasive plants in the eastern U.S. A single mature autumn olive can produce well over 100,000 seeds in a single growing season. And because birds love the berries, those seeds get scattered for miles. Autumn olive also cheats the local ecosystem chemically. Its roots host nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which raises soil nitrogen levels in places where native plants evolved to thrive in poor, low-nutrient soil. Once the chemistry shifts, native species struggle to compete, and autumn olive can take over entire hillsides within a few years. Ironically, it was originally promoted by the Soil Conservation Service and other federal agencies for erosion control and wildlife habitat, especially on reclaimed strip mine land in Appalachia. Minnesota now classifies autumn olive as a prohibited noxious weed, making it illegal to import, sell, or transport. Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and West Virginia have all banned its sale as well, and South Carolina added autumn olive, along with its relative Russian olive, to its banned sale list starting in October 2024. 7. Himalayan blackberry. Despite the name, this blackberry isn't from the Himalayas at all. The species, properly called Rubus armeniacus, actually originates in Armenia, and it was introduced to the U.S. by horticulturist Luther Burbank around 1885, marketed under the name Himalaya Giant, simply because that sounded exotic. The berries really are excellent, 3 times the size of native blackberries and intensely sweet. The plant attached to them is a different story. Canes can grow many feet in a single season and reproduce 2 separate ways at once, by seed and by tip rooting, where the end of a cane touches soil and sprouts an entirely new plant. In Oregon and Washington, where it's classified as a noxious weed, Himalayan blackberry has swallowed entire abandoned properties, fence lines, and pastures under canes thick enough that clearing them requires heavy equipment and serious caution, since the thorns can injure both people and tractor tires. Oregon State University Extension estimates regional land managers spend real money every single year just trying to hold the spread in check. 8. Russian olive. Out west, the concern with Russian olive isn't really the small, mealy, silvery fruit, it's water. Russian olive roots run deep along riverbanks and can draw significantly more water than native cottonwoods and willows, which is a serious problem in drought-prone parts of the West where every gallon is contested. As the tree spreads along a waterway, it can lower local water tables and dry up stream-adjacent habitat that ranchers, farmers, and wildlife all depend on. It also practices allelopathy, releasing chemical compounds into the surrounding soil that suppress the growth of competing native vegetation. Colorado and New Mexico both regulate or restrict Russian olive, and it's listed as a noxious weed in Montana, Wyoming, Utah, and Nevada as well. In October 2024, South Carolina banned the sale of the entire Elaeagnus genus, the family that includes both Russian olive and autumn olive, treating the 2 water- and nutrient-hungry invaders as a single problem. 9. Common buckthorn. Common buckthorn's scientific name, Rhamnus cathartica, is a fairly blunt hint about what its small black berries do once eaten. They act as a powerful natural laxative, which is exactly how birds end up spreading the seeds so efficiently across the upper Midwest after a meal. Buckthorn also wins by getting a head start every single year. It leaves out earlier in spring and holds its leaves later into fall than almost any native plant around it, soaking up sunlight before the competition even wakes up. Like several other plants on this list, it also releases allelopathic chemicals into the soil that suppress neighboring vegetation, and it's known to host crown rust, a fungal disease that damages oat crops, along with the soybean aphid. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Massachusetts all regulate or restrict common buckthorn as a noxious weed, and conservation groups across the Midwest spend significant money every year on removal crews trying to keep forest understories from turning into a single-species buckthorn monoculture. 10. Durian. Known across Southeast Asia as the king of fruits, durian has rich, custard-like flesh that fans describe as one of the best things they've ever tasted. It's also infamous for a smell so powerful that Julia Child once compared it to dead bodies mixed with strawberries and cheese. The odor comes from a complex mix of sulfur compounds and esters, and it's strong enough to linger in fabric and upholstery for days. Durian isn't federally banned in the United States, and there's no nationwide law against owning or eating one. What does exist are private policies. Airlines, hotels, and apartment buildings across the U.S. and around the world frequently write their own rules against bringing it inside, simply to protect other guests and tenants from the smell. The reputation isn't exaggerated either. In 2018, the scent of a forgotten durian in a cupboard triggered a full evacuation of a university library at RMIT in Melbourne, Australia, after staff mistook the odor for a gas leak and called in specialist response crews. In Singapore, eating durian on public transit or in many hotel rooms can mean a real fine. Despite all that, durian's popularity in the U.S. is genuinely growing, with frozen durian now showing up in some California Costco locations. 11. Common barberry. Common barberry sparked one of the largest agricultural eradication campaigns in American history, and the stakes behind it were almost existential. The shrub serves as the alternate host for Puccinia graminis, the fungus that causes wheat stem rust, one of the most destructive diseases to ever hit a staple crop. During the catastrophic 1916 epidemic, stem rust cut wheat yields by roughly 60% across Minnesota and the Dakotas in a single growing season, a disaster that hit just as American wheat exports were critical to the World War I effort. In response, the USDA partnered with 13 wheat-growing states to launch the barberry eradicati. On program in 1918, sending inspectors door-to-door across farming communities to locate and destroy bushes by hand. By the time the program officially wound down in the early 1980s, more than 500 million barberry bushes had been eradicated across states including Minnesota, the Dakotas, Montana, Nebraska, Ohio, Wisconsin, and several others. Many of those same wheat-growing states still legally restrict or ban common barberry today, and one common point of confusion is that the ornamental shrub sold at garden centers is usually Japanese barberry, a different species that doesn't host stem rust, though it has become its own invasive headache in the Northeast. 12. Trifoliate orange. Small, fuzzy, and far too sour to eat fresh trifoliate orange, scientifically Pancerus trifoliata, is mostly grown today as cold-hardy rootstock for grafting commercial citrus varieties, prized for making trees smaller and more winter-tolerant. The plant's real history with American agriculture, though, is the opposite of a quiet, resistant carrier. Trifoliate orange is actually one of the citrus relatives most susceptible to disease, and the very first major U.S. citrus canker outbreak, discovered across several Gulf states in 1915, was traced directly to a shipment of infected trifoliate orange nursery stock imported from Japan. It's also armed with 3-inch spines hard enough to puncture tractor tires, and it has gone invasive in parts of the Southeast after escaping cultivation. Because of both the disease risk and its tendency to spread uncontrolled, movement of trifoliate orange is tightly regulated today under federal and state citrus quarantine programs run by USDA APHIS in Florida, Georgia, Texas, and other citrus-producing states, where officials ask residents to report wild plants to their county agricultural extension office rather than attempt removal themselves. 13. Manchineel. The Spanish called it Manzanilla de la Muerte, the little apple of death, and Guinness World Records has gone on to officially name it the most dangerous tree on Earth. Every part of the manchineel, the fruit, the bark, the milky sap, and even the smoke if you burn its wood, contains potent toxins. Standing under one during rain can cause severe skin blistering as sap-laced water drips down. And historians believe the Calusa people in Florida coated arrows with manchineel sap, possibly contributing to the death of Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de León in 1521. Here's the twist most people don't expect. In Florida, manchineel isn't banned, it's protected. The tree is officially listed as an endangered species there, found mainly in pockets of the Everglades and the Florida Keys, which means it's actually illegal to harm, cut down, or remove one without state authorization, regardless of how dangerous it is. That's why, instead of being eliminated, manchineel trees across Florida and the wider Caribbean are marked with bright paint, red bands, or warning signs in multiple languages, a system used everywhere from Curaçao to South Florida's coastline to keep people away without destroying a genuinely rare species. 14. Privet. Privet hedges define the look of American suburbs for generations, prized because they're fast-growing, dense, and easy to shape into the kind of crisp, manicured lines that line driveways from Connecticut to Georgia. The genus Ligustrum includes several commonly planted species, among them California, Chinese, European, and border privet, all originally brought over in the 1800s purely as ornamental hedging. The trouble starts when privet leaves the yard. Birds eat its small dark berries and spread the seeds into forests, where dense privet thickets can shade out native wildflowers, shrubs, and tree seedlings that need more light to establish. Once it takes hold, an area can shift toward a near monoculture of privet, with very different insect and bird life than a healthy native forest would support. Massachusetts has banned the sale of border privet since 2009. Connecticut restricts 3 separate privet species by name, and Tennessee, Maryland, Florida, New York, and New Hampshire all regulate other privet species, with the exact rules varying depending on how invasive a particular variety has proven to be in that state's climate. 15. Starfruit carambola. Sliced crosswise into its signature 5-pointed star, carambola looks like the perfect addition to any fruit bowl or cocktail garnish, and for the overwhelming majority of people, it's a completely safe, sweet tart treat. The danger is narrow but serious. Star fruit contains high levels of oxalic acid along with a compound called caramboxin, discovered and named by researchers in 2013, both of which are normally filtered out efficiently by healthy kidneys. In someone with chronic kidney disease, that filtering doesn't happen properly, and caramboxin can build up in the bloodstream and cross into the brain. Case reports describe a frighteningly fast progressio. Relentless hiccups as an early warning sign, followed by confusion, muscle weakness, seizures, and in documented severe cases, coma and death within days, sometimes triggered by as little as half a single fruit in a patient with advanced kidney disease. There's no broad American law banning star fruit, but the medical risk is taken seriously enough that Brazil, where the fruit is widely eaten, has public health laws requiring consumer warnings about it, and many emergency room doctors now ask kidney patients directly whether they've recently eaten star fruit when unexplained seizures or hiccups bring them in. From a toxin that can stop your nervous system within hours to a hedge that quietly reshaped entire forest ecosystems, these 15 fruits prove that what grows in a garden isn't always as innocent as it looks. Some of these rules protect people directly, some protect billion-dollar industries like wheat and citrus, and some protect ecosystems, or in manchineel's strange case, the plant itself, from disappearing entirely. Before you plant anything unfamiliar, it's worth a quick check with your local agricultural extension office. The line between a beautiful addition to your yard and a genuine legal or medical problem is sometimes thinner than you'd think.